So Christine, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to have Whoiscpark here. You are a multifaceted emerging DJ and producer who's based in Toronto. You have a lot of different and kind of unexplored sounds that come through your mixes. I feel like every mix you drop on SoundCloud is a little bit different, but it's all kind of unique. There's definitely a Toronto influence and element coming out of that. So I'd like to start off this interview with you so you can share with me a little bit more about who you are and how your interest in DJing started.
Yeah, for sure. You know what? It's actually the hardest question to answer when people ask like who you are, because I feel like that's still a question that I ask myself, hence the name Who is C Park. It's just a never-ending journey of figuring out who I am and what inspires me. But my DJ journey began about 6 years ago. I was in my fourth year of university, and it was just one of those things that I've always wanted to do, but never really took the step forward to do until my last year of school. But yeah, it's been quite the journey. You know, I started producing pretty recently as well, so I'm constantly looking for new ways to challenge myself. I've also had the opportunity to explore a lot of different spaces within DJing. So everything from like club events, student events, dance battles, doing live stream events, doing corporate gigs, weddings. So I've really gotten to dabble in a lot of different areas within it so far. And it's all been a really cool learning experience. And I'm sure there's a lot more yet to come. So
That's awesome. And so I have to ask, what did you study at school? And is that related in any way? Like, is it business, or like do you feel that now in your role as a DJ you draw on any of that kind of formal education, or no?
it's funny because what I went to school for pretty much has nothing to do with my creative passions. I went to school for medical science and psychology. Psychology I switched into later, but that's kind of when I started to realize like how much I love connecting with people and just understanding them on an emotional level. And that's why music has just become such an important part of my life in that sense, because it's my favorite way to connect with people. So I guess in that sense, there's a bit of similarity, but in terms of where my career path was before I graduated from school, I was in a completely different place.
Well, that's interesting how you went from like kind of the super sciencey, like the med science, to more the psychology. And I could see definitely that the psychology would have more crossover into what the work that you do now as a DJ, and especially when it comes to performing, if it's outside of venue, as you had mentioned, like, corporate gigs or live
Mhm.
streams or weddings, things like that, where it almost takes a different skill set and a different
Mhm.
understanding of how you kind of play to the crowd. So like, how do you feel that your style changes depending on where you play?
I think a good thing about being in so many different spaces that I realized what makes me feel most comfortable and like who I am as an artist. So I found that just me kind of following my own gut and my own flow of things has helped me find my niche. Like I kind of went in different directions because I wanted to kind of find what I would vibe with, I guess, the most and what felt right to me. But I think that's just a part of my brand that I've started to just embrace a little bit more. It's just me being a jack of all trades and being able to really do any genre that I want and any genre that my heart desires, and just finding a way to connect it to the people around me, you know? And then, of course, you know, depending on the kind of set that I'm playing, whether it's live in front of a crowd or just at home, you know, putting a mix together, like I'll always make sure that I go in telling a certain type of story, you know, whether it's a little bit more on a lower level, just a little bit more chill, or if I want to bring something high energy. It really depends on, you know, how I'm feeling on a particular day.
Yeah, that's cool. And it's interesting how I found as DJs, like some people say you shouldn't ever be a jack of all trades and things like this, like you should hone
Hmm.
in. But I kind of like, from what I've experienced working in the music industry, like I actually think if you're a freelance DJ, it is really good to be able to play different styles of music. You will expand where you can play. And I think especially, early on, it's really important to do that so that you know what it is that you like, oh, like this type of music, that makes sense. right? So yeah, like it's interesting that I think as DJs, that actually can be a strength versus in other areas in business and different, sectors, it could actually
Mhm.
work against you, right?
Yeah, I actually spent a while thinking that I shouldn't approach like my music that way because I felt the same way too. I felt like I had to identify with a singular sound or like a certain type of vibe, and that's how I would get bookings or get noticed. But then I guess as I've gotten to accept who I am as an artist over the years, I realized that my brand could be being multifaceted, you know, it could be like me being able to do whatever genre that people are feeling in the moment. You know, it doesn't, you don't have to stay confined to one particular sound or one genre if that's not who you are as an artist. So that's actually something that I didn't really embrace really until the last maybe 1 or 2 years. And I've gotten a lot more positive feedback from it ever since, like a lot more than I expected. So it's been really nice.
Right on. That's awesome. And you mentioned live streams. I want to talk a bit about that. I know you did a
Yeah.
live stream on New Year's Eve, and I
Hmm.
imagine something, especially in our day and age right now, just because of the pandemic, that's probably going to be increasingly more prevalent. Like,
Hmm.
what is your experience with live stream, and how does doing a live stream change in terms of like either your mindset or the type of music? And does it not really change? Like, is it still you, authentically
Hmm.
you in each, or do you feel that you kind of go into it with a different, yeah, like headspace?
I think I actually feel like I have more creative freedom doing live streams because it's kind of just me in my own space and just feeling out what I'm feeling, you know? And of course, like it'll never compare to being in front of an actual crowd and an audience and just like vibing off of their energy. But at the same time, like having full creative freedom has been really nice, especially in the process of getting to know myself as an artist. But yeah, I mean, it depends on the type of live stream that I'm doing as well. I've been very fortunate to have been invited to do live streams that are hosted by other collectives and other groups. And I'll always make sure that I do a little bit of research before and see kind of what the vibe is, depending on what event I'm playing. But yeah, I mean, I feel like I've had a lot more creative freedom to do what I want these days. So that's been pretty nice. The process itself is pretty much the same though, otherwise.
Nice. Yeah, I can see that, right? Like there's something when you do a live stream set, like it almost because you're so like isolated, it kind of does take away a bit of say anxiety of like, not being under pressure of coming in, leaving, and having that turnover. Like you're in your home or you're in your own studio, whatever it is. So you get a little bit more comfortable and you probably can maybe step outside of what you would normally do, right?
Yeah, 100%. I definitely feel less afraid to take risks, I guess, just to put it that way. And I never do the same thing more than once either. So, you know, if you hear whatever mix that I did last or whatever live stream that I did last, you can almost guarantee that the next one's not going to be anything like it. So that part of it has been really exciting for me too.
Respect. That's cool. And then, so another question I have for you is a bit kind of outside the DJ, but I know you also produce. So let's talk a bit about some of your productions. What are your most recent productions, and what do you have kind of coming up, and where can people find that?
So, I've been producing for about a year now, and I started with house music because that was my first love when I started DJing as well. House music was just the genre that I kind of fell into. So that's the kind of music that I produced. As of right now, I'm releasing everything just on SoundCloud and Bandcamp. So if people want to download the file and play it in their own sets, they can find it on Bandcamp. It's my goal to get music on Spotify this year. Finally, it's been on my list of things to accomplish as an artist. So hopefully by this year, it'll be available on Spotify as well. And then another focus of mine in terms of music production is collaborating with other artists. So I have a couple things in the works with other artists. I can't say too much about it right now, unfortunately, but when the time comes, of course, it'll be available on all of my socials and everything like that. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, good luck in getting on SoundCloud, and I look forward to hearing what these collabs are coming up. And I guess a question off that, how did those collabs, without going into detail, maybe speaking more broadly here,
Mhm.
how did the collabs come about, and like what are strategies that you would give to other artists who are looking to find you know, similar style, you know, musicians or producers or vocalists? What would you say is a good strategy in terms of outreaching to say people that you admire to try and get to work together on a track, or maybe even as yourself as a DJ and producer to even be like, hey, can I remix one of your songs? What has been your strategy for that outreach?
I think I've been very fortunate to have certain opportunities come my way, and I realize the only thing that I've really been doing is staying consistent and pushing content out there on a regular basis, you know. And I've been a lot more active on social media as well. So being able to share a lot of my work with people outside of my personal network has naturally, you know, drawn in attention from other artists who are kind of on the same wavelength. So that's how some of my projects that I'm working on right now have started. Like it was literally just somebody sent me a message and was like, "Hey, like I really like your work. Would you be interested in working together?" And it could work by vice versa as well. You know, if you find somebody that you vibe with pretty hard and you feel like you have a lot of similarities in your sound, then just go for it. Just shoot them a message. It really doesn't hurt to try, you know? So
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually such a good point, right? Like just literally reaching out to people, you never know what you will get by asking. So that's, yeah, that's cool that that's kind of how it's kind of helped you by just being present. And there's something you messaged there. There's something that you said there as a message that I thought was really powerful, which is you've been consistent, right? Like
mhm.
by just showing up, that can really put you ahead of the people who are inconsistent, because by being inconsistent, like you're letting down your followers, and that's like literally half the battle. So for you, like how have you maintained like a mindset to be consistent? Like what motivates you to always be posting? Do you follow a schedule? Do you work with someone to help you pump out content? Because I did notice that as well, kind of before our interview, looking up, and yeah, you are posting consistently. You have a kind of consistent brand, kind of dark urban aesthetic.
Mhm.
So where does that come from? Is that all you? Like, is that DIY, or do you work with anyone for that?
Yeah, so it's currently just me as my own team doing everything, all of my branding, marketing, graphics, videos, you know. It is just me currently, but I think just having been through the pandemic and having to pivot, it's given me a very clear sense of what the big picture is for me. And it's definitely something that I want to do long term, you know, like I don't want to play the short game and just kind of get to where I want to be all in one go, you know. And I realized consistency is going to be the most important thing. And I used to obsess over, you know, making things perfect all the time, but I realized, you know, being obsessed with making everything perfect was actually holding me back from being consistent. And I saw this quote by James Hype the other day, and he said that it's better to release content that's great on a regular basis versus releasing perfect content hardly at all, you know? So it doesn't have to be like 100% perfect every single time, because if you're trying to do that, then you may never get to releasing anything, you know? That's why it took me all these years to finally start releasing my own music, because I just told myself like I needed to get to a certain point in order to put myself out there. But as soon as I, you know, stopped going into it with that mindset, I found that it was a lot easier just to stay consistent, you know?
Yeah, it's a nice quote. I like that. Like it's something that I feel like hinders a lot of us in
Hmm.
the age of, you know, social media and like the gaze of the other, and wanting to always be putting our like this perfect persona out there. But in reality, like at the end of the day, things that sometimes you don't expect are going to take off. And sometimes things that you put your like heart and soul
Yeah.
into like barely get noticed, right? And it's just like,
Yeah.
you know, you
Yeah.
can't win even when you try to. So you may as well just like put out content and wish for the best.
Yeah, for sure. The whole idea of like setting a really high expectation for yourself in that sense, like just making something and being like, oh, this is going to be a banger and everyone's going to listen to it. Like sometimes, you know, those kind of expectations could backfire, you know, just got to go back to your roots and say, like, why am I even doing this in the first place? You know, it's because I love it and it's a part of who I am. And if I can share it with the world, then that's a huge opportunity already as is, you know? So I find not obsessing too much over making everything perfect has definitely gotten me farther. So.
Nice. And Okay, on that note, what would you say for you has been a successful strategy in terms of growing your following? And it's one thing to be consistent, but how do you then scale on that consistency and increase that engagement, increase who's listening to you, especially as a musician, right? How do you build traction and snowball?
I think something that's been really helpful for me is actually just being involved with the community that you're trying to influence, So obviously for me, like those communities would be the DJ community, the EDM community, all the different genres that I like to play with. I try to immerse myself in those communities. I look at other artists' work. I always comment on their posts if I really like vibe with what I'm hearing. And I feel like connecting with other people who are kind of on the same wave as you, it definitely helps boost yourself forward as well, And I really feel like giving back to the community is going to be it's something that a lot of artists overlook, I find, because we're always like trying to push out our own content and make sure that we're keeping up with our own goals, right? But the whole point of making art is to share it. And if you're not appreciating what other people are sharing as well, then how do you expect your craft to be shared with other people too, So I found that's been a really big help, just being a little bit more involved with what's going on around me as well. And social media, now that everybody's online these days, makes it a lot easier to be, involved in what other people are doing. So
Yeah, it's a good point, and it's something actually that I was speaking with a mentor of mine recently. And I was explaining this idea that I had, and you should be posting regular content, you should be posting quarterly content, and then you should have. So it's a theory that I heard where it's like there's three types of content you want to be posting. So it's like you want to be posting like consistently, like weekly content that someone can come back and like binge watch. So like, and relative to you, maybe that's, like a live stream every Friday, you have a live stream, people can come back and listen to those archives. Then you want a quarterly piece of content that you like build hype for, that in like the world of business could be like an ebook or like a report or something like that. Maybe for you, it's like a 2 hour mix, it's a much longer piece that, like Lane 8 does like his like spring 2018, it's like a 4 hour mix.
Yeah.
Right. Or like RL Grime does his like Halloween set every year and he gets RL Stein to do the intro, right? Like that is that quarterly annual, really big piece. And then you want small pieces kind of in between that it's kind of more human, it's conversation starters. So it's things when things come up on the fly, like, oh hey, I'm featured in this podcast, or hey, I'm in this magazine, or whatever it may be. It kind of shows more who you are, like the person behind it, rather than that other consistent content that you're putting out. And so anyways, I mentioned, I was talking about the strategy because we were talking about building content for social. And this mentor, Rachel, she's like, one thing that I would say is like the fourth thing to add here is community. She's like, you got to bring up your community. She's
100%.
she's like, everything you said, I 100% agree with. And I do that. But the community is that fourth, like, it's the fourth puzzle piece that will really like take you off, because, people love people who give back. Do you know what I mean? And like, and don't do it in, a way, it's like you have to be genuine when you do it. But I was like,
100%.
yeah, that's such a good point. Like, build your community.
Yeah, and there really is so much unrecognized talent out there. And now that, everybody's just been home and we've had more time to explore, it's really made me realize like there's so much out there that we just don't know about, and there's always going to be new opportunities to find new talent and to just find, music or work that you appreciate, whether it's been on your radar or not in the past. So I think just I know the pandemic sucks in a lot of ways, but that was one really big silver lining, I think, for a lot of artists, is that we've been able to find each other now, finally, after all these years. So that community aspect of it is super, super important for sure.
So I want to dive a bit deeper into this. And, I know you're based in Toronto. I know you did that set like on New Year's Eve. And it's part of like a collective. But talk to me a bit about your experience in Toronto and like who are some of the like that collective that you're involved in and like how has that really helped shape who you are as an artist?
So in terms of, I guess, my involvement in the Toronto community, I started my DJ journey in London. So I found a lot of my connections kind of shifted over to the GTA once I moved back. But a lot of my gigs were actually in the dance community before I went into the EDM scene. So doing a lot of dance battles for poppers, lockers, breakers, all styles, that kind of stuff, and playing more gigs that revolve around that kind of music. I played at the Socialite Bar in Kensington on Wednesday nights for about 6 months a few years ago. So I played a lot more like hip hop, R&B, funk, disco, those kind of vibes. In terms of the EDM community, I haven't had too many opportunities to play in that scene yet, but after having honed my interest in it a little bit more in the last year, I definitely want to pursue more of those opportunities for sure.
Nice. That's cool that you come from the like hip hop, the dance scene, and and you're kind of yeah dabbling a bit more into like the electro scene. I feel like both of those are quite strong. Like I feel like both the hip hop and the EDM have like strong communities in
Mm-hmm.
Toronto. Do you see much crossover between those in terms of style and like people, or do you think that not necessarily siloed, but they kind of are two like independent communities, and there isn't that much
Yeah.
crossover with artists and things like that?
Actually, it's funny you mentioned that because that's something that I did notice during my time as a DJ. And I realized I also want to find a way to kind of bridge the gap between the two because I know I can't be the only one who resonate with both communities on the same level, and it's always been tough for me feeling like I have to choose between one or the other. But if I can find a way to just build a bridge between the two and somehow like bring people together from both communities, that would be a huge goal accomplished for me. But yeah, I agree with what you said. I think that right now it's very separate, but I hope to see it come together in the future, and I hope that I can play some kind of role in that as well.
Do you think that trap music is like I almost see trap music as that bridge? Do you know what I mean? Because you're getting
Yeah.
like the 808s and its origins are in like Atlanta in like R&B and the hip hop scene, but then like so many DJs have now adapted it and made trap more EDM. Like I don't like I that to me is the clearest crossover. I'm not saying you become like a trap
Hmm.
DJ or anything. Um,
Yeah.
but like yeah, I don't know. Like, is there a big trap scene in Toronto?
I would say so. Yeah, there's a niche for pretty much any subgenre of EDM out there, and I agree with you 100% that trap is one of those genres that like really brings the two together. And if I would ask, my friends in both communities and say like, "Oh, like what kind of music do you like on the other side?" And like trap seems to be the genre that kind of meets right in the middle. And it's funny that you say, "Oh, you don't have to be a trap DJ," because I actually love trap music, and bass music is a really big part of my sound now. So I'm hoping to find ways to, again, just bridge the gap somehow and find a way to have all the genres find some kind of harmony. And trap music's just one of the ones that does it perfectly. So,
Do you know the song? It's by Blue Monday. It's like a song from the 80s. It's called New Order.
New Order. No, I don't think so, actually.
So really similar kind of similar parallels we could be made here. Um, sorry, New Order's the band, Blue Monday's the song. Yeah, a really
Yeah.
good song. I'll send it to you. But anyways,
Cool.
this song is so influential in history because it was at a point where you had the disco people who are like coming from like the 70s and 60s, and you had a
Hmm.
lot of house music that was pumping up in the 80s and 90s, and this song I believe came out in 88.
Hmm.
And why it's so why it's such like a landmark song in like music history, as it was the kind of first song that bridged like disco elements and house elements together and it was like a song that like on the dance floor disco people and house people finally started to like have a good time together, because there was a lot of tension between disco communities and the house communities prior to that,
Yeah.
and this song kind of like broke bread with those two communities, and from there on out you started to see a lot more of this mix, and people were like, oh, like we can, it doesn't have to be just a disco track or a house track, like you can blend the
Mhm.
styles together. And then, you know, hence you get a lot of Daft Punk after this coming into the 90s that follow on this like, you know, disco-y house sound. So it's really cool. You should check out that song. It's a banger track by all means.
Yeah.
But yeah, good track, good track.
I-
Yeah, sorry, were you about to say something there?
Oh, I was gonna say I was actually looking into just the origins of house music not too long ago, and I feel like that might have been the song that came up in the documentary I was watching. But it's funny that you mentioned that because every time there's some kind of new element introduced to a genre of music or like just a different way to look at it, there's usually a lot of like pushing back from the community at first because it's just not something that you're used to, you know? So that's one of the things that I think about a lot as someone who's trying to bridge the gap is that I have to kind of be ready to have people react that way at first, you know, because I feel like people identify very strongly with certain sounds or with certain genres, and for you to like tweak it in a certain way, like some people might see that as like, you know, like you're bending it a little bit too far, you know. But I think it's really cool that people have been trying to bend the rules for all this time, and I hope that it becomes more, I guess, normalized in the music industry, just to find, you know, just ways to make things a little bit more interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it will happen. And I think we are slowly seeing it. But I think, as you said, there will always be somewhat of you know, there'll always be the laggards who are hesitant to change. But then there will always be, you know, the innovators who are either making the change or like listening to this new sound and, you know, fully embracing it because it's different. And I think you kind of like
Hmm.
music industry needs that. It needs, you know, that shake up every once in a while,
Hmm.
kind of birth new genres and things like that.
Yeah, 100%.
So, kind of coming close to wrapping things up here, is there anything that we haven't spoken about that you wanted to talk about? You know, whether it's something that's upcoming for yourself that you want to give a shout out to, or something that you thought that you know we were going to talk about and we haven't yet, and we wanted to chat about.
I think, I guess one piece of advice for anybody who's looking to really hone in on their artistic craft is, you know, don't go looking for an answer or for like the secret sauce or whatever. I find that's been coming up a lot, like, oh, what did you do to become successful kind of thing. But the answer is that there is no secret sauce. You know, there's no like one smart strategy that every artist used to become successful. You know, it's more about just mastering the fundamentals, putting in the reps, staying consistent, and just making sure you're doing it with a good intention, you know, and you're not just doing it for clout. It's just something that you're truly passionate about. So if there's anybody out there that's looking for an answer, I'm just here to tell you that there is none. Just got to keep going and keep working on your craft, and that's it.
Yeah, there's way too many gurus out there that claim they have the one click
Yeah.
solution, and that just like right away when I see that, it's just like red flag. You know what I mean? Because there
Hmm.
is no one click get rich, you know, get fame quick overnight solution. Like people
Yeah,
who made it
exactly.
put in a lot of blood and tears to making it. Uh,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah. So how can people connect with you if they want to listen to your music? I mean, we mentioned SoundCloud, Bandcamp, Spotify soon enough. But if they want to
Yeah.
DM you, what's the best place to reach out to you? What is your alias? I mentioned it earlier, but remind us.
Yeah. I mean, you could reach out to me on any of my socials, really, Instagram, Twitter. Those are the two that I'm the most active on. I do have a lot of live streams coming up. The next one's going to be next Saturday. I'll be playing at 7:30 p.m. EST. The festival is called Beat Boop Crossing. Again, all the information is going to be on my social platforms. It's also happening this weekend if you guys want to check out some underground artists from all over the world. But yeah, if you just keep up with my socials, I always announce everything there. Got a lot of projects coming up, so just keep your eyes peeled.
All right. Check Christine out. And that's following Whoiscpark. And that's the same off all channels. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, same handle for pretty much everything. So
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much, Christine. And last question here. What does creativity mean to you as an entertainer?
Creativity. It's just a journey of finding yourself and finding out who you are as a human. I know that's a very generic answer, but it's, I don't know, it's the best one I've got, and it's what I've realized it all comes down to at the end of the day, at least for me. So
That's good. I love it. Thank you so much. And yeah, I look forward to sharing this episode. It's been awesome chatting with you and
yeah,
look forward to hearing that live stream as well next Saturday. That's really
yeah. Thank
sweet.
you so much for having me. It was an honor to be here.
Cheers.
All right, take care.